Couple encounter Sasquatch on Wolstrom Hollow in the Sawtooth Mountains. I am going to show you around both sides of this mountain from low elevation to high elevation because Sasquatch has been spotted several times in both alpine and high desert terrain on this very mountain. And I'm sure Bigfoot is interested in both of these habitats, just as the other animals are around the Sawtooth Mountains, because of the different types of resources these places provide. Carol writes BFRO Report number 20884. I live in Kimberly, Idaho. While my grandson was here visiting, we drove to the South Hills in the Sawtooth Forest. We turned off on a dirt road called Wolstrom Hollow. I have been there many times looking at the beaver dams. We drove as far as we could, then parked my pickup and walked about a quarter mile more, when I saw through the trees a silver object and thought I heard people talking, which would have placed them where the beaver dam is. I stopped and noticed a lot of elk and deer droppings and a very strong smell. I asked Brandon if he smelled it, and he said no. He said he kept hearing loud sticks banging together or against rocks. I could not hear that, but I kept smelling a very strong odor. Then Brandon, who was 17 at the time, said he saw a scary thing. At about the same time my dog, which was on a leash, barked very loud with her hackles up. I said, "Let's get out of here." On the way back to the pickup, Brandon says he thinks it is following us, and my dog kept looking back. I just said, "Keep walking." I didn't want to look like prey. At the time, I didn't know exactly what he saw. We got in the pickup and drove out. Brandon then told me he saw a large hairy thing, hunched over, very tall, bigger than a bear, and had piercing yellow eyes. He kept telling me it looked him right in the eyes and scared him so bad he couldn't move or talk. I had to tell someone. Then I talked to a friend who hunts and rides horses in the mountains and has cattle up in that area. Well, he said that someone reported a Bigfoot sighting around there about 3 years ago, and they saw the tracks. I am too afraid to go back there by myself. I think we stumbled on it eating a deer or an elk. This Class A sighting happened on August 15, 2007, near Rock Creek Road, just south of the Hanson Ski Lodge. Here's a follow-up report by Nancy L. Jones. I spoke with the reported witnesses and learned that she is a former law enforcement deputy. She recounted the disturbing encounter she and her grandson had and said it is something they both think about every day. A few additional details came out in the phone interview. The grandmother was familiar with this particular area and in the past has enjoyed the multitude of birds and small animals that live along the creek. The day of the sighting, the reported witnesses, her grandson, and her 8-month-old puppy left Kimberly, Idaho in the late afternoon for a nature outing. Having not visited this spot for about a year, the grandmother mistakenly took a wrong turn at the fork as they neared the dam site. Realizing her mistake, she turned her truck around and headed back to take the correct turn. As soon as she made this turn and headed toward the dam, she was overcome with an eerie, uneasy feeling. This area had never given her a negative feeling before. Puzzled, not wanting to disturb her grandson and ruin the outing, she kept this to herself and continued as far as the road was safe for her truck to drive. Wanting to enjoy the fresh air, they had the windows down as they drove. Both noticed that no bird or animal noises could be heard. This is quite unusual in the grandmother's past experiences here. They pulled off the road in a pull-out area, and the three of them began hiking toward the meadow and dam. Grandmother noticed lots of elk prints and droppings and some deer sign where they parked and along the trail. She had never seen any sign of elk or deer presence here before. The closer they got to the meadow with the beaver dam, the more uncomfortable the grandmother felt. She also began smelling a strong animal odor and thought maybe it was related to all the undulated droppings in the area. After walking about a quarter mile, they stopped when the grandmother thought she heard people talking or mumbling. At about the same time in the direction of the dam, she saw a silver or gray object, perhaps a car? Putting two and two together, grandmother figured there must be some people up to no good parked in the trees beyond the dam. She kept focused in that direction. Grandson was looking off to the side where he thought he saw something moving in the trees. As they stood still, listening and watching, Grandmother asked grandson if he smelled or heard anything. He replied that he kept hearing sticks being banged together or against a rock. Grandmother decided to tell the grandson that she wanted to turn around because she felt uncomfortable going further. Before she could say anything, grandson said something scary was watching at him from the cover of the trees less than 30 yards away. At the same time, grandmother's unusual playful puppy sensed something threatening and let out a warning bark. Although frightened, the three of them began walking back to the truck and resisted the urge to run. The dog kept looking back, and the grandson said that he thought the thing he saw was following them. They heard twigs snapping periodically behind them. Once in the truck and headed home, grandmother asked grandson what he saw. He said he saw something that was really tall, hunched over, and peering through the trees at him. It looked like a person with a lot of hair all over its body, except it was much bigger than a man. The most striking feature of the animal was its large eyes that were bright yellow, like the sun. It looked right at him, and the grandson described the eyes as penetrating and evil. He felt menace in the animal's stare and knew they needed to leave right then. Grandmother and grandson have not been able to get this experience out of their minds. Grandson is particular, says he still is upset about the way the animal looked at him. Grandmother thinks that they may have disturbed an animal while it was feeding on an elk or a deer. They never did see another car or any people down the road in the beaver dam. Grandmother surmised that the nearby forest fires this year may have pushed both the ungulates and the Sasquatch into Wolstrom Hollow in search of food. Grandmother said she will not go back there alone, but would like to look for footprints and other signs left by animal that the grandson saw. I've made plans to accompany her there to look for physical evidence. The grandson has returned home to a different state. I will report what we find after I return from the on-site visit. On the on-site visit, August 22nd, 2007, I spent an hour with the female witness, exploring the area where the sounds and the sighting occurred. She was very credible and was able to give me detailed description of how the events unfolded on site. We did not find any direct evidence of Sasquatch presence. We did find a large bedding area, Sasquatch, or perhaps part of the elk herd, and two 30-foot aspens bent across the road leading to the beaver pond, like an arbor. All the elk sign was at least a few days old, so the herd had apparently moved on to another grazing area. Presumably, the Sasquatch followed.